The roar of the crowd in the Nyumbani market suddenly fell silent when Abeni appeared. Her imposing 2-meter-tall figure made its way through the stalls, effortlessly carrying a huge barrel of oil that normally required 4 men to move. Sellers and buyers stepped aside as she passed, some with looks of amazement, others with expressions of poorly concealed fear. Abeni tried to ignore the whispers that followed her like persistent shadows. "Look, it's the monster princess," murmured a woman, not bothering to lower her voice. "How can King Oba allow her to be the heir?" replied another. The words pierced her heart like thorns, but Abeni kept her head high, her amber eyes fixed on her destination, the royal warehouse. Upon arrival, she gently set the barrel down, demonstrating perfect control over her superhuman strength. Zuri, her younger sister, awaited her with a smile that didn't reach her almond-shaped eyes. "Oh, dear sister," said Zuri, her voice sweet as honey but with an undertone of venom. "Always so useful. It's lucky we have someone so strong to do the heavy lifting." Abeni stood up straight, her polished ebony-colored skin glistening with a fine layer of sweat. Despite being the eldest, she often felt small next to Zuri's beauty and grace. "Someone has to do it," she replied softly, her large hands involuntarily clenching into fists. Zuri stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Yes, but don't you think it would be better if you could be normal? Think how happy you would make father if he didn't have to worry about finding you a husband." Zuri's words hit Abeni like a punch in the stomach. Before she could respond, a horn sounded in the distance, signaling that King Oba was summoning the court. "Let's go," said Zuri, taking Abeni's arm with exaggerated delicacy. "We mustn't keep father waiting." As they walked towards the palace, Abeni couldn't help but notice how people stepped aside as they passed, some bowing respectfully, others looking with a mix of fear and curiosity. Zuri, on the other hand, received warm smiles and greetings. Her beauty was legendary in Nyumbani, with her smooth caramel-colored skin and her delicate figure that seemed to float rather than walk. The palace of Nyumbani stood majestic in the center of the city, its golden stone towers shining under the blazing sun. Guards armed with spears bowed as the princesses passed, though Abeni noticed how their eyes followed her cautiously. In the throne room, King Oba awaited them. Despite his average height, his presence filled the room. His eyes, identical to Abeni's, softened at the sight of his daughters. "Abeni, Zuri," he greeted them with a nod. "We have an urgent matter to discuss." Abeni felt her heart race. Whenever her father mentioned urgent matters, it usually had to do with her future and that of the kingdom. "As you know," the king began, his deep voice filling the room, "tradition dictates that the heir to the throne must marry before her 21st lunar cycle. Abeni, that day is fast approaching." Abeni lowered her gaze, her large hands clenching into fists. "Father, I know, my daughter," the king interrupted gently. "I know it hasn't been easy to find a suitable suitor, but the kingdom needs stability. It needs to know the line of succession is secure." Zuri stepped forward, her face a mask of concern. "Father, if I may suggest, perhaps it would be better for everyone if I—" "No, Zuri," the king cut her off firmly. "Abeni is the firstborn and the legitimate heir. We will find a solution." At that moment, the doors to the room burst open. A messenger ran in, his face pale with fear and covered in scratches and dirt. "Your Majesty," he cried, falling to his knees. "The forest of Mbaya, it's alive." A sepulchral silence fell over the room. The forest of Mbaya, the vast expanse of ancient trees surrounding Nyumbani, had always been a place of mystery and legends. But alive? "Explain yourself," ordered the king, his voice tense. "The trees, Your Majesty," continued the messenger, trembling. "They are moving. They have attacked several villagers on the forest's edge, and there are rumors of creatures, beasts never seen before." Abeni felt a shiver run down her spine. The forest of Mbaya had always been a place that intrigued and terrified her in equal parts. As a child, she often snuck away to explore its edges, fascinated by the sounds and smells emanating from its depths. King Oba stood up, his face a mask of concern. "This is serious. We must act immediately. I will summon the Council of Elders." As the king gave orders and the room filled with activity, Abeni remained still, her mind racing. Perhaps this was the opportunity she had been waiting for, a way to prove her worth, to show she was more than just her physical strength. "Father," said Abeni, her voice firmer than she felt, "let me go. Let me investigate what is happening in the forest." The king looked at her, surprised. "Abeni, it is too dangerous. I cannot risk the heir to the throne on such a perilous mission." "Precisely why I must go," insisted Abeni. "I am the strongest in the kingdom. If anyone can face the dangers of the forest, it is me. Besides," she added, her voice lowering, "perhaps this is the way to prove I am worthy of leading Nyumbani, with or without a husband by my side." King Oba was silent for a long moment, his eyes studying his eldest daughter. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well, Abeni. But you will not go alone. You will take a small group with you, including our best tracker." Zuri, who had been unusually quiet, stepped forward. "I will go too," she declared, surprising everyone in the room. "Zuri, you don't need to put yourself in danger," began Abeni, but her sister interrupted her. "We are sisters, Abeni. Where you go, I go. Besides," she added with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "someone has to make sure you don't destroy the entire forest with your strength." Abeni felt a mix of gratitude and suspicion at her sister's words, but she nodded. "Thank you, Zuri." King Oba stepped forward, placing a hand on each of his daughter's shoulders. "May the gods protect you," he said solemnly. "Depart at dawn. The fate of Nyumbani is in your hands." As they left the throne room to prepare for their mission, Abeni couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and fear. The forest of Mbaya had always been a mystery, a place of legends and unknown dangers. What secrets would they uncover in its depths? And how would this adventure change not only her destiny, but that of all Nyumbani? The night before their departure, Abeni couldn't sleep. She paced her room, her mind filled with thoughts and worries. Was she really ready for this mission? Could she protect her sister and the rest of the group from the unknown dangers lurking in the forest? A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Mama Zalika, the palace's elderly healer. "Abeni, my child," said the elder, her voice laden with wisdom and concern. "I see the nerves won't let you rest." Abeni nodded, grateful for Mama Zalika's comforting presence. The healer had always been kind to her, treating her like any other person, without fear or excessive reverence. "I have something for you," continued Mama Zalika, pulling a small leather pouch from the folds of her tunic. "It's a mix of sacred herbs. They will protect you on your journey and give you clarity of mind when you need it most." Abeni took the pouch, feeling its comforting weight in her palm. "Thank you, Mama Zalika. But do you think I'm really doing the right thing? What if I'm not able to solve the mystery of the forest? What if I disappoint everyone?" The elder took Abeni's hands in hers, her touch surprisingly strong for someone her age. "Listen to me, Abeni. Your strength doesn't lie only in your muscles but in your heart. You have a kindness and wisdom that many don't see because they are blinded by your appearance. Trust yourself. Trust your instincts. The forest of Mbaya is ancient and mysterious, but you have your own mysteries to discover." Mama Zalika's words comforted Abeni, giving her a confidence she didn't know she needed. With a farewell hug, the elder left, leaving Abeni with her thoughts, but now more at peace. Dawn came too soon. Abeni dressed in sturdy travel clothes, specially designed for her size. As she adjusted her boots, her gaze fell on the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her. A tall and muscular woman with polished ebony-colored skin and eyes that reflected a mix of determination and doubt. "I can do this," she told herself, straightening her shoulders. In the palace courtyard, the small expedition group was already gathered. Zuri was there, dressed in travel clothes that somehow managed to look elegant. Beside her was Kato, the kingdom's best tracker. Abeni felt a slight blush on her cheeks as she saw the young man. She had always admired his skill and kindness, though she had never dared to talk much with him. Cato was a medium-height man, with muscles defined by years of traversing the kingdom's toughest terrains. His skin was the color of rich earth, and his deep brown eyes seemed capable of reading the forest's most hidden secrets. When he saw Abeni, he gave her a warm and respectful smile. "Princess Abeni," he greeted with a nod. "It is an honor to accompany you on this mission." Abeni felt her heart race slightly. "The honor is mine, Cato. Your skill will be invaluable in the forest." King Oba approached to say goodbye. He hugged each of his daughters, his face a mask of paternal concern. "Remember," he said, his deep voice grave, "the forest of Mbaya is ancient and powerful. Respect it, but do not fear it. Trust your instincts and take care of each other." With a final hug and a blessing from the royal priest, the group departed. Abeni led the march, her steps firm and determined. As they left the safety of Nyumbani and approached the forest's edge, the atmosphere changed. The air grew denser, filled with unfamiliar smells and mysterious sounds. The entrance to the forest of Mbaya was imposing. Ancient trees, taller than any building in Nyumbani, rose before them, their branches intertwined to form a canopy that barely let sunlight through. Abeni felt a shiver run down her spine. It was as if the forest was watching them, evaluating. "Where do we start?" whispered Zuri. Cato stepped forward, his eyes scanning the ground. "There are tracks here," he said, pointing to barely visible marks on the ground. "They're not from any animal I know. And look," he added, touching the bark of a nearby tree, "these marks. It's as if something scratched the tree, but no beast I know could reach this height." Abeni nodded, her mind working quickly. "We will follow the tracks, but stay alert. We don't know what we're facing." The group entered the forest, with Cato leading the way, following the mysterious tracks. As they advanced, the light grew dimmer, and the forest's sounds grew louder. Creaks and whispers seemed to come from all directions. After several hours of walking, the forest began to change subtly. The trees, already huge, seemed to grow even larger. Their trunks twisted into impossible shapes, and their roots jutted out of the ground like giant fingers trying to catch the intruders. "Something is wrong," murmured Cato, stopping abruptly. "The tracks have disappeared." Abeni tensed, her senses on high alert. The forest had fallen into an unnatural silence. Not even the whisper of leaves broke the stillness. Suddenly, a deafening crack filled the air. The ground beneath their feet began to shake. "Watch out!" shouted Abeni, just as the roots of nearby trees came to life, rising from the ground like giant snakes. Without thinking twice, Abeni grabbed Zuri and Cato, one in each arm, and leaped back just as a massive root struck where they had been standing. The other group members scattered, dodging the attacks of the living roots. "Run!" ordered Abeni, placing Zuri and Cato behind her. With superhuman strength, she tore a thick branch from a nearby tree and used it to strike at the roots advancing menacingly. Zuri screamed as a root coiled around her ankle. Abeni turned quickly, breaking the root with a precise blow from her makeshift weapon. "Stay close!" she shouted to her sister. Cato, showing surprising agility, dodged the roots gracefully while guiding the rest of the group. "This way!" he called, pointing to a narrow passage between two ancient trees. The group ran, with Abeni covering the rear, her powerful figure a barrier between her companions and the attacking roots. As they advanced, the forest seemed to grow denser, darker. The trees' branches intertwined overhead, blocking almost all light. Suddenly, Cato stopped abruptly. Before them, the ground dropped sharply, forming a deep ravine. The roar of an underground river echoed from the depths. "We're trapped!" panted Zuri, her eyes wide with terror. Abeni looked back. The roots were still advancing, closing off their only escape route. She made a decision in a split second. "Everyone, hold on to me," she ordered, extending her arms. "Abeni, what are you going to—" began Zuri, but her question turned into a scream as Abeni, with everyone clinging to her, jumped into the ravine's void. For an endless moment, they fell into darkness. The wind whistled in their ears, mingling with the group's terrified screams. Abeni kept her eyes open, desperately searching for something to grab onto. Suddenly, she saw a glimmer in the darkness. A thick vine hung from the ravine wall. With superhuman effort, Abeni stretched out her free arm and grabbed it. The impact was brutal. Abeni felt her shoulder dislocate under the combined weight of the group, but she refused to let go. Slowly, with strength she didn't know she possessed, she began to swing, gaining momentum. "Get ready!" she shouted, and with one final effort, swung towards a small ledge on the ravine wall. They landed hard, rolling onto the cold rock. For several minutes no one moved, all panting and trembling from the adrenaline. Finally, Kato stood up, looking at Abeni with a mix of awe and gratitude. You saved us all." Abeni tried to smile, but the pain in her shoulder was intense. "We're not safe yet," she said, her voice tense. "We have to find a way out of this ravine." Zuri approached her sister, her eyes full of concern. "You're hurt," she said softly, touching Abeni's shoulder. "I'll be fine," replied Abeni, though the pain was almost unbearable. "The important thing is that we're all alive." Kato examined the ledge where they had landed. It was narrow, barely wide enough for them to move single file. "There's an opening up ahead," he said, pointing to a crack in the ravine wall. "It could be a cave." "It's our best option," Abeni nodded, getting to her feet with difficulty. "Let's go." The group moved slowly along the ledge, with Kato leading the way and Abeni bringing up the rear. The crack Kato had seen turned out to be the entrance to a deep cave. Upon entering, they all stopped, amazed. The cave was illuminated by a soft blue glow that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Ancient symbols and drawings covered every surface, telling a story none of them could fully decipher. "It's beautiful," whispered Zuri, her fingers gently tracing one of the symbols. Abeni felt a strange energy coursing through her body. The pain in her shoulder began to subside, replaced by a warm, tingling sensation. "Look," said Kato, pointing towards the back of the cave. "There's something there." In the center of the chamber, on a stone pedestal, rested a crystalline orb. Inside the orb, a blue light pulsed softly, as if it were alive. Abeni took a step towards the orb, feeling an inexplicable attraction to it. Just as she was about to touch it, a voice echoed through the cave, startling everyone. "At last you have arrived, children of Nyumbani," said the voice, which seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The forest of Mbaya has waited for this moment for centuries." "Who are you?" asked Abeni, her voice firm despite the fear she felt. The light inside the orb pulsed more intensely. "I am the guardian spirit of the forest of Mbaya, and you, especially you, Abeni, are the key to restoring the balance that has been lost." Abeni felt all eyes on her. "Me? But why?" "Your strength is not a curse, Abeni, but a gift granted by the forest itself," continued the voice. "Generations ago, an ancient evil was sealed in the depths of Mbaya, but the seal is weakening, and only someone with your strength can renew it." Zuri stepped forward, her face a mix of confusion and determination. "But why has the forest been attacking people? Why did it attack us?" "The forest is scared," replied the voice sadly. "As the seal weakens, the evil begins to awaken. The forest defends itself, sometimes blindly, in a desperate attempt to protect itself." Abeni looked at the orb, feeling the weight of responsibility fall on her shoulders. "What must I do?" "You must take this orb to the heart of the forest," explained the voice. "There, using your strength and the orb's power, you can renew the seal and restore peace between Nyumbani and Mbaya." Kato stepped closer to Abeni, placing a hand on her uninjured shoulder. "You are not alone in this, Abeni. We are with you." Zuri nodded, taking her sister's hand. "Together, as it should have always been." Abeni felt a surge of gratitude and determination. She looked at her group, seeing the same resolve in their eyes. "Very well," she said, turning to the orb. "Guide us, spirit of the forest. We are ready." The guardian spirit's voice echoed once more in the cave. "The path will not be easy. The evil lurking in the forest's depths will try to stop you. You must stay united and trust in your strengths." Abeni took the orb carefully. As her hands touched its crystalline surface, she felt a current of energy run through her body. The pain in her dislocated shoulder disappeared completely, and she felt stronger than ever. "How will we find the heart of the forest?" asked Cato, his voice filled with wonder and concern. "The orb will guide you," replied the spirit. "Follow its light, but be vigilant. The forest will test your determination and your hearts." With these words, the guardian spirit's presence vanished, leaving the group in a silence filled with expectation and fear. Abeni looked at her companions, her eyes shining with new determination. "Let's go," she said, lifting the orb. "We have a forest to save and a kingdom to protect." The group left the cave, finding a completely different landscape. The ravine had disappeared, replaced by a dense forest of giant trees. The orb's light pulsed softly, pointing a path through the twisted trunks. As they advanced, the forest seemed to come alive around them. The branches moved as if pushed by an invisible wind, and strange shadows danced on the edge of their vision. Zuri moved closer to her sister. "Abeni," she whispered, "do you think we can do this?" Abeni squeezed her sister's hand. "We must," she replied. "For Nyumbani, for the forest, for all of us." Cato, who was leading the group, suddenly stopped. "Something is coming," he warned, his body tense and alert. From among the trees, shadowy figures emerged. They seemed to be made of the same darkness that lurked between the trunks, their shapes shifting and their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "The shadows of evil," murmured Abeni, remembering the guardian spirit's warnings. The creatures advanced, surrounding the group. Abeni positioned herself in front of her companions, the orb glowing intensely in her hands. "Back!" she shouted, her voice resonating with an authority that surprised even herself. To her amazement, the shadows retreated, hissing in pain at the orb's light. But they did not withdraw completely, lurking at the light's edges, waiting for an opportunity to attack. "We must keep moving," said Cato, his voice tense. "We can't stay here." Abeni nodded, and the group began to move, with the princess leading, using the orb as a beacon to keep the shadows at bay. Each step was a challenge, with the dark creatures constantly trying to get closer, only to be repelled by the orb's light. As they advanced deeper into the forest, the challenges became more intense. Roots surged from the ground, trying to capture them. Branches moved like whips trying to strike them. Abeni used her strength to protect the group, tearing out roots and breaking branches with one hand while holding the orb aloft with the other. Zuri, who had always seen her sister's strength as something monstrous, now looked at her with awe and newfound respect. "Abeni," she said during a moment of relative calm, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry for how I treated you. Your strength? It's incredible." Abeni looked at her sister, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "Thank you, Zuri. I always wanted you to see me as your sister, not as a monster." "Never again," promised Zuri, taking Abeni's hand. "We are in this together, until the end." Cato, who had been watching the exchange, smiled. The spirit was right. Our strength is in our unity. Just as it seemed the group had found a new balance, the forest launched its most dangerous challenge. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble violently, and a deafening roar filled the air. From the earth emerged a colossal creature, an amalgamation of rock, roots, and darkness. Its eyes glowed with the same unnatural light as the shadows, and its mouth was an abyss of darkness. "The corrupted seal guardian," whispered Abeni, instantly understanding what the monstrosity was. The creature roared, launching an attack with its huge arms of rock and root. Abeni barely had time to push her companions out of the way before the blow landed, creating a crater in the ground where they had been standing. "Run!" shouted Abeni. "Find the heart of the forest. I'll stop it." Zuri and Cato hesitated, but Abeni's determined look convinced them. With one last glance at the princess, they ran deeper into the forest, following the faint light of the orb Abeni had given them. Now alone facing the monstrous guardian, Abeni stood tall. For the first time in her life, she felt grateful for her extraordinary size and strength. "Very well," she murmured, flexing her muscles. "Let's see what you're made of." The corrupted guardian launched another attack, its rock and root arms whistling through the air. Abeni dodged the blow by inches, feeling the wind of the impact stir her hair. Using the momentum, she launched herself forward, striking the creature's torso with all her strength. The impact was deafening. Pieces of rock and splinters flew through the air, but the guardian barely recoiled. Abeni jumped back, narrowly avoiding a counterattack. "You're tough," she panted, "but I'm stronger." Meanwhile, Zuri and Kato ran through the forest, dodging branches and jumping over roots. The orb in Zuri's hands pulsed faster and faster, indicating they were nearing their destination. "There!" shouted Kato, pointing ahead. Before them stood a colossal tree, larger than any they had ever seen. Its roots extended for hundreds of meters, and its canopy was lost in the clouds. In the center of its trunk was an opening, pulsing with the same blue light as the orb. "The heart of the forest," whispered Zuri in awe. But before they could approach, shadows surged from the ground, forming an impenetrable barrier. Back in the clearing, Abeni fought with all her might against the corrupted guardian. Each blow she landed opened fissures in the creature's rock armor, but it regenerated almost instantly. "Why do you fight?" roared the guardian, its voice an echoing distortion that resonated in Abeni's mind. "You belong nowhere, neither to your kingdom nor to this forest." Abeni grunted, dodging another attack. "You're wrong. I belong to both places, and I will protect them with my life." With a battle cry, Abeni leaped, grabbing one of the guardian's huge branches. Using all her strength, she began to spin, lifting the creature off the ground. With one final superhuman effort, she hurled it against a group of nearby trees. The impact was devastating. The corrupted guardian crumbled, its parts scattered across the clearing. But Abeni knew she didn't have much time. She ran in the direction Zuri and Kato had taken, praying to arrive in time. At the forest's heart, Zuri and Kato fought against the shadows. The orb kept the dark creatures at bay, but they were completely surrounded. "We can't reach the tree!" shouted Kato, his back against Zuri's. Suddenly, they heard a crash. Abeni appeared, running, tearing through the shadow barrier as if it were smoke. "Abeni!" exclaimed Zuri, relieved. Without wasting a second, Abeni took the orb from her sister's hands. "Cover me!" she ordered, before launching herself towards the central tree. The shadows lunged at her, but Zuri and Kato intervened, using branches as improvised weapons to keep them at bay. Abeni reached the tree, her heart pounding. Before her, in the center of the trunk, was a perfect cavity for the orb. Without hesitation, she placed it in position. A burst of blue light flooded the forest. The shadows screamed, dissolving into the air. The ground trembled, and for a moment, Abeni feared she had made a terrible mistake. But then, a sense of peace and renewal spread throughout the forest. The trees seemed to straighten, their leaves glowing with new life. The air filled with bird songs and the buzzing of insects. Abeni fell to her knees, exhausted but relieved. Zuri and Kato ran to her, embracing her. "You did it," whispered Zuri, tears of joy in her eyes. "You saved the forest, and all of us." Kato nodded, his face filled with admiration. "You are truly extraordinary, Princess Abeni." Before Abeni could respond, a soft light emanated from the central tree. The forest's guardian spirit appeared before them, its ethereal form more defined than before. "Abeni of Nyumbani," said the spirit, its voice full of gratitude. "You have demonstrated not only your physical strength, but the strength of your heart. The forest of Mbaya owes its existence to you." Abeni stood up, supported by Zuri and Kato. "I did what I had to do," she replied humbly. "For my people and the forest." The spirit nodded. "And for that, I offer you a gift. I can remove your supernatural strength, give you the normality you have always desired, or I can bless you, making your strength even greater. The choice is yours." Abeni was breathless, surprised by the offer. All her life she had dreamed of being normal, of fitting in. But now, she looked at Zuri, seeing the new respect and love in her sister's eyes. She looked at Kato, noting the admiration and something deeper in his gaze. She thought of her father, her people, the forest she had just saved. With a smile, Abeni made her decision. I thank you for your offer, guardian spirit, but my strength is not a curse as I once thought. It is a gift, a responsibility. I do not need to change. I accept myself as I am." The spirit smiled, its form glowing with approval. "You have chosen wisely, Abeni of Nyumbani. Your acceptance of yourself is the greatest strength of all. Go in peace, and know that you will always be welcome in the forest of Mbaya." With these words, the spirit vanished, and the trio suddenly found themselves at the forest's edge, within sight of Nyumbani's walls. As they walked towards the city, Abeni felt a new confidence in each step. No longer did she shrink from people's looks of amazement. She walked tall, proud of who she was and what she had accomplished. King Oba awaited them at the city gates, his face a mix of relief and pride at seeing his daughters return safely. "Father," said Abeni, her voice firm and secure, "we have solved the mystery of the forest of Mbaya and secured peace for our kingdom." The king embraced his daughters, tears in his eyes. "I am so proud of you, my girls. Abeni," he added, looking at his eldest daughter, "you have shown yourself to be a true leader. The kingdom will be in good hands with you as future queen." Abeni smiled, feeling a peace she had never experienced before. "Thank you, Father. I am ready to assume this responsibility, with or without a king by my side." As the news of her feat spread throughout Nyumbani, Abeni knew the challenges were not over. The relationship between the kingdom and the forest would need to be rebuilt, the prejudices that still persisted would have to be faced, and she would have to prepare for her future role as queen. But now, with self-acceptance and the support of those who loved her, Abeni felt ready for any challenge the future might bring. However, in the depths of the forest of Mbaya, something stirred. A shadow that had escaped purification, a seed of darkness that waited for its moment to grow. The danger had passed, but a new adventure loomed on the horizon. Dear listeners, this concludes the first chapter of the exciting saga of Abeni and the Forest of Mbaya. What did you think of our heroine's journey? Do you think her decision to accept herself will change how the kingdom sees her? And more importantly, what dangers lurk in the forest's shadows, waiting for the right moment to re-emerge? If you want to find out what new challenges Abeni will face on her path to becoming queen, don't miss the next episode. Will she be able to maintain peace between Nyumbani and the forest of Mbaya? Will she find love in the brave Kato? And what role will Zuri play in the kingdom's future? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to be the first to hear the continuation of this fascinating story. Leave your comments with your theories and opinions, and if you enjoyed Abeni's adventure, share it with your friends and family. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we will see you in the next chapter of Abeni and the Forest of Mbaya.